Good morning, friends. I welcome you to this Good Friday remembrance as we look upon this familiar cross in this familiar place. It seems strange, really, to be in this place, in this sanctuary, in our home, without the benefit of the family. Seems strange to be in this space void of people, with the chairs stacked and waiting for another day. And yet, as I reflect on this experience, it makes me wonder if in some way Jesus might have experienced this sense of aloneness, this sense of emptiness, as he hung there upon this familiar symbol, waiting to experience God in a new way. We are the people who have lived beyond this event, and we know that God continues with us and that we are not alone. And so I am grateful this morning that I am not alone as we share in this Good Friday remembrance. I'm appreciative of the contributions of Tom Powell, Elin Sletmoen, and Angie Bugg, who shared with me in creating a time to remember. I invite you now to prepare yourselves in prayer as we listen to a bit of music that will usher us in to our Good Friday service.
Love's Climb by Rita Simmons. Calvary is an ascent that seems base. A mountain love climbs. The cross is a stake driven in the heart of the earth to save it from lies. Holds a weight that's forgotten, that cries, hangs a promise it cannot betray. Hold on with all your strength. There's power in climbing to sacrifice every day.
Luke 23. As they led him off, they made Simon, a man from Cyrene, who happened to be coming in from the countryside, carry the cross behind Jesus. A huge crowd of people followed, along with women weeping and carrying on. At one point, Jesus turned to the women and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't cry for me. Cry for yourselves and for your children. The time is coming when they'll say, 'Lucky the woman who never conceived. Lucky the wombs that never gave birth. Lucky the breasts that never gave milk.' Then they'll start calling to the mountains, 'Fall down on us,' calling to the hills, "Cover us up." If people do these things to a live green tree, can you imagine what they'll do with dead wood? 2 others, both criminals, were taken along with him for execution. When they got to the place called Skull Hill, they crucified him along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Dividing up his clothes, they threw dice for them. The people stood there staring at Jesus, and the ringleaders made faces, taunting, "He saved others. Let him save himself. The Messiah of God, ha! The chosen, ha!" The soldiers also came up and poked fun at him, making a game of it. They toasted him with sour wine. "So you're the king of the Jews. Save yourself." Printed over him was a sign, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging alongside cursed him, "Some Messiah you are. Save yourself. Save us." But the other one made him shut up. "Have you no fear of God? You're getting the same as him. We deserve this, but not him. He did nothing to deserve this." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you enter the kingdom." He said, "Don't worry, I will. Today you will join me in paradise." By now it was noon. The whole earth became dark, the darkness lasting 3 hours, a total blackout. The temple curtains split right down the middle. Jesus called loudly, "Father, I place my life in your hands." Then he breathed his last. When the captain there saw what happened, he honored God. This man was innocent, a good man, and innocent. All who had come around as spectators to watch the show, when they saw what actually happened, were overcome with grief and headed home. Those who knew Jesus well, along with the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a respectful distance and kept vigil.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when the sun refused to shine? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb?
This is Good Friday. It is one of the most significant events of the Christian year.
And I've always wondered why Good Friday services are so sparsely attended in our Protestant tradition. Could it be that the annual reminder of Jesus' death on a cross is just too uncomfortable? Or could it be that this statutory holiday coincides with the onset of spring and prairie people just want to go outside? Or could it be that centuries of Christian theology have presented an understanding of the crucifixion that no longer resonates with liberal, Protestant, progressive Christians? The earliest interpreters of the Good Friday event were the Jewish followers of Jesus, who were more than familiar with the idea of sacrificing to appease a disappointed God. Hebrew Bible stories about sacrificing doves or bulls or sheep abound in the scriptures. Do a Google search of sacrifice in the ancient world, and you will learn that the Jews were not much different than their neighbors in believing that sacrifice, even blood sacrifice, was desired by the gods. Fortunately, those ancient Hebrews clung to the story of Isaac, in which their God seemed to draw a line prohibiting human sacrifice. Sacrifice is the backdrop to the traditional understanding of Good Friday. Even though the ancient Hebrews had long since abandoned human sacrifice, there was a lingering belief that God still desired more substantial atonement for the sins of the world. And so those new Christians, formerly Jews, who wrote the stories of Jesus, interpret his death on the cross as the ultimate payment for human sinfulness. Fortunately, there are some modern theologians who have called this idea into question, the idea that a loving God would require such a heinous act. So why celebrate Good Friday at all? Why bring to mind Jesus' death on the cross? Why think about sacrifice? I've come to believe that Jesus' death was the consequence of his unwavering commitment to God's love, rather than an act of obedience to a demanding God. Jesus was willing to sacrifice his own safety and security to stand with the marginalized, to stand with those who were socially and economically ostracized in his society, to stand with those who, because of race or gender, because of age or illness, because of marital status or occupation, were being set aside, overlooked, persecuted. Jesus was willing to sacrifice his own safety and security, to stand against rigid religious structures that excluded and condemned rather than offering hope and possibility. Jesus' unwillingness to walk back from demands for justice or to renege on acts of compassion threatened those in power. The Roman occupation forces and the Jewish religious establishment were threatened by Jesus' commitment to love unconditionally. It was his refusal to abandon love that resulted in his execution. The protest march on Palm Sunday and the ominous stories of Maundy Thursday were signs that danger awaited. There would have been those who counseled him to retreat or suggested a pilgrimage into the desert far from the present dangers. But Jesus had committed his life to living love into the world, and so, despite the risk, he persisted. Speaking truth to power always risks the possibility of sacrifice. The following article was printed in the Malaysian English language newspaper, The Star. It reads, Dr. Li, an ophthalmologist at a hospital in Wuhan, China, warned his medical classmates on December 30th of 2019 of his suspicion that 7 patients associated with a live animal market had been admitted to his hospital with a SARS-like infection. Subsequently, Dr. Li was accused by Wuhan's Public Security Bureau on January 3rd of making false comments that had severely disturbed the social order. He was one of 8 people investigated for spreading rumors. The warning issued to Dr. Li stated, if you keep being stubborn, fail to repent, and continue these illegal activities, you will be brought to justice. He was forced to sign an order promising not to do it again, not to speak of this anymore, and he returned to work. As an ophthalmologist, Dr. Li contracted the coronavirus from a female patient who had no visible signs of infection. He later died. Those who speak truth in the midst of power are still vulnerable to false accusations and kangaroo courts. It should be no surprise that God seeks to empower both love and justice, as one cannot truly exist without the other. The prototypical image of one who is willing to risk life for love and justice. The vision of Jesus on the cross, one who risked his life for love and justice, is being reenacted the world over in these days of COVID crisis. The God power is still being incarnated in seemingly ordinary people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for others. The British newspaper The Guardian reported on the sacrifice of a French physician, the first to die in his country. They write, Jean-Jacques worked on an emergency ward in Champagne, where France's first coronavirus cluster was recorded. His family announced his death in the social media with these words, Our father was a hero. Despite being of retirement age, he kept working to support his colleagues. He wanted to help. He sacrificed himself. Vietnam's Global.net reported this story. As the virus spread rapidly, it worried medical officials, even experienced ones. Ms. Hung, a ward nurse, reported. Yet she said the frontline medical staff were not reluctant to work, even overtime during the New Year's holiday, despite great psychological pressure and a high risk of infection. I am so proud of my colleagues, she said. Once an older Chinese patient, their first patient, had recovered. In spite of our sacrifices, we were very happy at the success of this life renewed. The American industry magazine Business Insider provided the following comment. There's a certain amount of pride that comes with the job, but definitely anxiety would be an overwhelming feeling, stated Rebecca, a 45-year-old grocery clerk. I'm scared to go to work, she said, and worried about getting sick over a job that pays less than $12 an hour. But, she insisted, I also feel like I just can't stay at home because the elderly need supplies and a kind word. It's a hard decision. The message of Good Friday morning is one of sacrifice for the love of humanity. The archetypal actions of Jesus are being lived out in large and small ways around the world by ordinary people who are infused with love for others and are willing to sacrifice their own safety, even on to death. I'm reminded of the scriptural words, "No one has ever seen God. But if we love one another, God lives in us, and God's love is made perfect in us." In these dark hours, while we wait for the power of resurrection, the love of God insists on being incarnated in the human heart. Thanks be to God, the source of love, justice, and compassion, who insists on being made known in the human community. Even on this Good Friday, we say praise and thanks be to God. Amen. As we bring our time together to a close, I've asked Tom to conclude with another brief poem. Please note the closing lines of the poem, the closing lines that send us forward from the cross with blessing and promise.
Good Friday by Arturo Michael. At place of skulls my cross is set, nailed hands and feet, crowned thorns of death. Darkness surrounds, the veil is torn, blood is shed, and I'm reborn. Into your hearts God's word will shine. We'll be together time after time. What was said is forever true. Love one another as I have loved you.